So next up, talk on DeFi automation from Nikola Vuković of DeFi Saver. So please welcome Nikola to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to the talk. Thanks for sticking around. I know it's past 4 p.m. already. So yeah, the idea is, I'm Nikola. I'm from DeFi. I come from the DeFi Saver team. I lead the sort of user-facing team of the whole app. So I wanted to give like a rough overview of what it was like, the past couple of years, basically building the whole automation feature system sort of thing. And so yeah, back in 2018, I think it was like late 2018, like the team was on Thailand. It was like a vacation sort of thing. I just realized I don't have the clicker for the slides. I don't know if that's like yeah. So anyway, back in 2018, like the team was on Thailand on like a vacation sort of thing, and it was a vacation. Everybody was like, it was a Thursday evening. They were out in a bar. They started, they were having beers and everything. And, if you ever hung out with like great, thanks so much. If you ever hung out with like any of the crypto bros, half of us have like a widget on our home screen, like a CoinGecko widget, So, they were having beers and somebody noticed on their phone like the price of ETH was going down. And Nenad, one of the guys at the time, had like a CDP open. So what that means, if you haven't, had a chance to like do something like with MakerDAO or borrow and lend using Compound. So basically, Nenad had some ETH that he didn't want to sell. He wanted to hold it for the long term, but he needed cash for the Thailand trip. So basically, he supplied his ETH as collateral and borrowed a bunch of DAI. Like DAI is a stable coin that's pegged to the dollar so far. And he used it to pay for the trip. So the idea was like he'd pay back the debt eventually over time, and he'd take back his ETH. So yeah, that's fine. That works fine. But like the thing with CDPs is that your collateral has to be like significantly larger than your debt. So it was like at least 50% larger. And CDPs work until your collateral drastically loses its value, like the price of ETH, for example, goes down, or you create too much debt. So Nenad, one of the guys that had the CDP, realized mid beer that he was about to get liquidated. So he ran back to the hotel. He rushed back, and he managed to save his position, even though he didn't really have like any extra collateral. So long story short, how he did it. So let's imagine like he has $1,400 worth of collateral in ETH, and let's say he has $800 worth of debt. So this is a wrong number. It says 600. Let's say it was 800. So what Nenad basically did, so initially he had like a ratio between the collateral and the debt, which was like around 1.75, so 175%. And he took like a small chunk of his collateral. He took it out, he sold it for DAI, and he like repaid his debt. So he basically made the whole position smaller, but he actually increased the ratio between the collateral and the debt. So he made his position safer. He did sell a chunk of his ETH, but he was safe from liquidation, from the liquidation penalty. So that's like the gist of it. We call that action a repay. Some call it a graceful unwinding or like a deleverage. That sort of thing. So yeah, Nenad realized right then there was it wasn't really easy to do. It took like 4 transactions. You had to do all these things. So it was like complicated. It was hard to do. It was also not very safe because you needed to take out your collateral. So that's the inception of the original CDP Saver idea. So just like to have a dashboard where you can manage your basically loan. Just do what Nenad did in a safer, easier, and cheaper way. That's like the main idea, and obviously with the end goal of preventing liquidation. So that was fine. Nenad could save his position, and now everybody could do it as well. But what if nobody noticed the price of ETH was going down? What if Nenad had to use his ledger instead of a MetaMask wallet, and he didn't have it on him, or what if he was just sleeping? So it became very apparent that like you can't really manage this type of thing manually, or it doesn't make sense really. So it makes much more sense to actually automate this. So just like that was like really the main idea of CDP Saver, just to like automate this process, because it was pretty straightforward. Like just set up a trigger that like if the ratio drops below a certain threshold, just repay your position back to like a safe ratio. And obviously, we implemented the opposite thing as well. So like if you're using your position for leveraging, when the price goes up, you can actually set up a trigger to like buy more ETH. So like just increase your ETH exposure. And that was like the main idea. We had no idea what was actually going to work in production, but like the only thing we knew off the bat was we had to make this completely trustless. So we can't really, because this is the user's position. It's someone else's money. We didn't want to have any inherent risk, when using automation. So we didn't want to actually be able to do anything that would, cause harm to the user or their position. So, safety checks were enforced. Well, actually, initially the way it worked, like you actually, when you subscribe to the automation, you just gave the automation system permission to just do that one simple action, which was like a repay. And there was like also a hard-coded check on the contract to actually see if the trigger conditions are met. So if the ratio is actually low, or like the ratio is above the threshold in the case of Boost. And obviously, and also when the transaction was actually, when the repay was actually done, there was also a hard-coded check on the contract that actually verified that the ratio actually went up. So if something went wrong with the repay process, if the wrong price was used or something like that, or like a malicious attack, or just a issue in our system happened, like the whole transaction would actually revert back. So it was like pretty safe on the contract side. And we sort of created this backend that did that. We launched it. We had no idea what to expect really in the in the real life circumstances, and users actually liked it. They got the idea right away. It's something they needed. There was a use case, and they subscribed, and a first price crash came by, and we were like glued to the screens. We were like monitoring the system. We had no idea what was going to happen actually, and it seemed to work. It repaid positions. It did what it was supposed to do, and however, like every significant price movement, we sort of like, so whenever like the price went up or down significantly, we learned something new. So there was like a new edge case that we had no idea before, that actually could exist. So, like for example, when the price is going up or down, it's obviously that's when gas price spikes, or like so like not only did you have to like you repay one position, but like if the gas spikes and that position gets stuck, that transaction gets stuck the repay transaction. Not only are you not gonna repay that position because the transaction is not gonna get mined, but you're actually like all the transactions after that one are also not gonna get mined as well, because the nonce is a larger nonce, so they're not gonna you have to like do it sequentially. So we actually had to implement like a system for resending transactions, for like monitoring if the transactions were actually mined, and then like also when when the price is moving significantly, you're gonna get a lot of slippage hits. So your exchange calls are gonna fail. So you not only have to monitor if the transaction was mined, you have to see if it actually reverted. What happened in the transaction? Like did it repay to the adequate ratio? Does it need another repay? So it was like every crash we learned something new, and the system was sort of getting more stable over time. And so if you were in DeFi, throughout 2019, DeFi summer, and like early 2020, you might remember March 12th. So this was the first significant crash of the price where the Ethereum blockchain actually had some significant usage. The previous crashes, there wasn't really DeFi. There weren't all these complex layered systems. But like this was like March 12th. Thankfully it was day, because if it was night, I don't know what would happen. Like so, like the price just started crashing and crashing and crashing, and it just kept going. It was like completely unprecedented. Like nobody knew what was going to happen in the whole DeFi. Like nobody knew if DAI was going to remain stable, if the liquidation processes are actually going to work. And we were just at the midst of it, just trying to repay all these positions, just trying to save the users from liquidation. So it was like pretty crazy. And we're like monitoring the system, it's sending transactions, and like all of a sudden, all the transactions just start failing. They're just like fail, revert after revert. Like, we have no idea why, because it just happened all of a sudden. Like, and it's like everything is unprecedented. Nobody knows. Like, this is like a first time for so many things. So we figured out like maybe 20 minutes later, the people from Kyber actually contacted us. They let us know what was going on, because Kyber was the largest sort of liquidity provider, actually decentralized exchange at the time. And they actually had a hard-coded gas price limit on their contract. If the price was like above, I think it was like 100 Gwei. I think, I'm not sure. Like it might have been even 40 or something. So if the price was like above, let's say 100 Gwei, they actually reverted the transaction right away, because they just assumed something malicious was going on. Like, why else would you need 100 Gwei for a transaction? Because it was just that level of unprecedentedness at the time. It was just like we were accustomed to transaction prices of like 2 or 3 or 5 Gwei. Like 20 Gwei was high. So yeah, they raised the transaction, the gas limit, and transaction started actually working. And I guess it ended up fine. Like I don't think anybody got liquidated. We actually got a bunch of these messages. It was like very cool, to see on Twitter, on Reddit, all these people like, oh, it worked, automation saved me. It was like a cool thing. So yeah, it was like very fun. So over time we realized we could also automate some other things. So you might remember the SAI to DAI migration. I think it was late 2019. We also realized it was like a very tedious process, because you couldn't migrate your position because there wasn't enough liquidity. It was a whole thing. So we just realized, okay, we can automate this as well. And then like over time, we also branched out from being CDP saver to just like DeFi saver. We integrated Compound and Aave, which were like the big protocols at the time. Obviously providing the same feature set, such as boost and repay, automation, the whole thing. But like we sort of got this reputation that we were like an advanced toolkit for like advanced DeFi investors. It was kind of hard to, it was like this reputation that we were like sort of an advanced tool, which actually brought in even more advanced users. And those users, I mean, that's a good, it's a fun problem to have, But like those users have all these crazy ideas of things they want to do, accomplish, and automate. And the ideas make sense. It's just very hard to, it's like a very specific use case that's like relevant to them, and like 2% of the users. So we integrated even more protocols over time and sort of grew organically. But it was like very hard to figure out what we want to automate next, because each new automation was like a specific specialized smart contract that had to be deployed. The whole automation system had to be tailored towards that specific smart contract that actually executed the action. So it was like very hard to scale. And so we had this system that was by now sort of stable, tried and true, robust, throughout all these crashes. It was like pretty trustless. It was backed completely by smart contracts, but it was very hard to expand. It wasn't easy to scale to like different strategies. So we kind of realized we need a new system that kept all the good parts of this one, the robust infrastructure and the trustlessness, but just make it more generalized in general. So we sort of started from the ground up, from the smart contract level. We developed this smart contract architecture that was very modular. It was made of these atomic actions for all the DeFi protocols at the time. So for example, maker supply, compound borrow, Aave flash loan, sell on Uniswap. Those were all like atomic actions. And the idea was to create this system so you can create like what we call a recipe, which is basically a list of all of those atomic actions composed together to execute this complex transaction that could interact with multiple protocols, just all this like, so we actually like, as a proof of concept, we made it into a UI that was like basically a drag and drop UI. And you could like, drag and drop like flash loan from Aave, supply to Maker, so you had this, the power of like the DeFi interoperability and like flash loans and all of these super abstract, powerful things that were like previously mainly accessible to smart contract developers. Now you had it in a basically drag and drop interface. So we launched it as like a standalone feature where you could like execute your recipe manually. And like the users used it in all these unprecedented ways that we just didn't even think of. It was like it was a very fun experience. But yeah, basically the recipe system was like a proof of concept for just overhauling our existing architecture into the recipe system. So all of those boost and repay specialized smart contracts were actually now being slowly transitioned to the recipe system. Obviously, the end goal being here to automate them. So you have your recipe, which is like, for example, a booster or a repay or closing your position or doing something special. And then you have a trigger, which is like what we previously saw, like for example, when your position ratio drops below a certain threshold, that's where you want to execute your recipe. And that's sort of the combination of those two things we call a strategy. So we had this system of recipes that was way more flexible. It allowed for so many things that previously were very hard to do. And we had the challenge of sort of keeping this flexible system as trustless as it was before. So you had this recipe which was very dynamic, and you had to like enforce all of these checks that we all deemed necessary. So we sort of followed the same principle as earlier. The system couldn't actually execute any recipe unless the specific triggers were met. All of these triggers were checked on chain. The data sources were also on chain, like Chainlink feeds, and like the actual recipe. When the user subscribes, all of these like arguments, the parameters of the actual recipe actions are hard-coded for the most part. Like the only part that's actually dynamic is the parameters that need to be dynamic. Like for example, the repay amount, which needs to be calculated by the backend to repay to a certain ratio. But like all of the other things, like for example, your position ID, your wallet address, those are all hard-coded. So, the system can't like withdraw funds and like send them to a different address or something like that. Yeah, so we launched that like last year, and as a proof of concept, we had this strategy that was. So again, if you had like a make your DAO position, you could actually set up a trigger that if the price dropped and your ratio dropped, you could actually use your savings account. So if you had DAI in your in Yearn or Convex or something like an MStable or something like that, you could actually just use it to like pull it out of the savings fund and like repay back your debt to avoid liquidation, which is something like you would do by hand anyway. So yeah, the proof of concept strategy sort of launched. It seemed to work. Like we had the robustness of the earlier system, and it definitely allowed us to iterate much more quickly. So like just a couple of weeks later, we launched the stop loss and like the take profit strategies, which are like basically just allow you to close your position when a certain price threshold is reached, whether it's like below a certain threshold or like when it reaches a profitable amount. It allowed us to scale pretty quickly to L2 support. We actually have Aave automation live on Optimism and Arbitrum through this system. It was like very sort of easy to do compared like to deploying the previous system. Another very fun thing that we actually did recently is like this very dynamic strategy. There was like it's called a trailing stop. So if you're like a financial person, you might know what a trailing stop is, but basically it's like it allows you to like follow the price trend while it's going upward. So while the trend is going, while the price is going up, nothing's gonna happen. But if the price drops for like a specific percentage from its peak, then that's where your position will be closed. You can see like the closing price is actually going up, with the actual market price, and when it finally drops like 20%, that's where the position is closed. So that's like something that was like very hard to do earlier. It was like very flexible to do in this new system. And yeah, obviously the end goal here being to allow all these users to set up their own special triggers and like special recipes. They're like custom for them, and allow them to automate whatever they want. So yeah, that was a quick overview of the past 2 or 3 years. Feel free to shoot some questions. Feel free to get technical as well. That's what I'm here for. So thanks for listening, guys. Cool. Any questions? OK, cool. Thanks for listening again.
Thanks, Nikola.
Yeah.